All right, Sanjeev, thanks for coming on. We're live now. So, I was thinking, can you just give a quick intro for everyone? Let them all know who you are and what you used to do.
Thank you, Finn, for having me. I know you've asked me some a few months ago. It's been a terrible
Mm.
time trying to get a new party registered. There's a lot of stuff that happened. My introduction is basically I came to Australia 20 or a bit more than 20 years ago, and I came here and then I took citizenship in 2005. I've been working in the Treasury for 15 years. After that, around 2005. Before that, I was in the Victorian Workcover Authority. So basically, I'm a lifelong career bureaucrat. Where in India I was in the civil service as well, and here I've been in the bureaucracy. And I was an economist as a great job to be in the Treasury. So that's my introduction. But then in terms of why you might be interviewing me, because you might have heard about me, because I'm sure you don't know about the millions of people working in the bureaucracy. There's so many of us. But the reason you probably are interested is because, or people are interested, is because I put my foot down at the atrocities being committed by Dan Andrews in Victoria through his police. He started beating up young people who were actually at no risk to themselves or to anybody else. And the entire approach to the pandemic was completely wrong. I've been talking about that within the Treasury. There are other economists also raising similar concerns. So, what happened here, Finn, is that everything that we knew about good policy has been completely violated and broken by these governments. And they've been copying China's policy, the CCP lockdowns, the Wuhan, stuff that happened there. Now, this is unheard of, unprecedented, and completely wrong. And since no one was listening properly and they started really beating up people, I didn't want us to become a China. I protested and I wrote some comments on Twitter. Then they said, hey, you got to remove your comments, and I said goodbye. I will fight you guys on the street. And so I'm fighting these guys on the street, which is what I think we need to do, because if we're not going to be
Mm.
able to get back our liberty now, these guys are determined. They're absolutely determined to make us into a China. We'll become a
Yeah.
stooge of China. Dan Andrews is already a stooge of China. We know that. He's gone to China so many times, done the Belt and Road Initiative, but he also managed to persuade Scott Morrison. So what's happened is the entire Australian government has shut down Australia. They are behaving like complete insane, bunch of people, overreacting to something which is a relatively modest pandemic by any standards, and following policies that are completely outside the scope of the laws of Australia.
Oh, wow. So, who like approached you and told you to remove the tweets? And what did
I,
you tweet?
you know, the boss's boss. There's obviously somebody must have complained that here's a guy
Mm.
who's in the treasury making a comment that this is a police state. And
Mm.
naturally, these guys might have said, "Hey, but you got to remove this." So no, it was my boss's boss and the HR department's boss or whatever. So uh, I think it's their right to say that, but I think they were unlawful. And I will, once this is over, I will actually be suing the department for damages, because they, in my
Mm.
view, that this is outside the scope of my code of conduct that I signed with them. And I've asked the Victorian Public Service Commissioner to also look at the matter, which of course the Commissioner has not responded at all. It's all clearly documented in my book, the kinds of
Mm.
things that were happening in the bureaucracy, which are completely wrong. We're supposed to be providing frank and fearless advice. That's why we join. We are not here to serve Dan Andrews. The bureaucrats of
Mm.
Australia do not serve the political masters. Please, let's be clear about that. The bureaucrats of Australia serve the people of Australia. They follow the laws. They make sure the laws that are made are followed, and they do not serve the whims and fancies of the politicians of Australia, who are only temporary residents in their seats, but the
Mm.
laws are permanent and they are based in the interests of the people. So when I found that the senior bureaucrats of the Treasury had been and are continuously supporting politicians, and the same thing applies to the police of Victoria, they have not done their due diligence as an independent regulator, which is required under the law. The more we see this, we can see how dramatically damaged our civil service has become in Australia, where the bureaucrats have become subservient to the political masters, rather than being independent advisors, which is their role under the law. Okay, so yeah, there very serious issues happening in Australia, and they've all been unearthed in the last 1 year.
Yeah. It seems like Dan Andrews is getting quite a lot of hate down there. Not too many people are on his side or taking his side on much. Is there any like particular stuff you were mentioning before? He was like, I'm up here in Brizzy, so I'm a bit separated. So I'm asking just out of curiosity here. You mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative before. What's he doing with that? What is he trying to bring in there?
The Belt and Road Initiative is
Mm,
China Xi Jinping initiated a program in 2012 or 13. That's the year he came in power, and he's used the surplus budget, surplus funds that we send to China and the US sends to China, the surplus dollars. He's used that to lend that money out to developing countries in Africa and in Asia. And he's also made headway into the developed world through Italy and some other countries in Europe, as well as in New Zealand. I think he was trying to do that. I think he's not I'm not quite sure whether he succeeded, but then of course he did succeed in getting Dan Andrews to sign up, which is completely wrong because a state government is not an autonomous body in the federal
mm,
constitution of Australia. They do not have control over the foreign policy of Australia. And this is a
yeah.
matter of foreign policy. And so for Dan Andrews to sign this was atrocious. And it is very clear that Scott Morrison and his team are completely lackadaisical. They don't seem to bother, and they in fact have supported Dan Andrews in so many ways. But of course, the Belt and Road Initiative, I think they're beginning to pull it back, and I'm not quite sure where it is at the latest position, but I think they're pulling the plug on it. Yeah.
Mm, damn. That's so I've not heard that before about him. That's all. That's why I was kind of asking about that. So he actually signed it. Like, why would they even give it to him to sign though? Like, he has, as you said, he's got nothing to do with the foreign policy of Australia. So why would?
China has been looking for since 1990s. The China has switched its strategy from being a nuclear power, which it is in a very strong way, into being an organization. The army there is focused on infiltrating the developed countries. So it wants to twist the arm of the West from inside. And the Australian had published a report some months ago, was it a year ago, where about 1 million people have been, a database of 1 million people was identified of people who are being planted by China in the big companies of the world, across the world, the media companies as well, and of course
Mm,
within the government. So for China, Dan Andrews was a very convenient beachhead. It's like I infiltrate the D-Day thing. So we come in from Normandy. Here we come in through Victoria, Melbourne, and we then latch on to Dan Andrews. Then from there expand the influence of China into the day-to-day lives of Victorians, and from there we expand into the rest of Australia. So this was obviously China's plan, and they've done this also in Italy, which also, by the way, was critically important in getting Italy to follow the lockdowns. And
mm,
the Dan Andrews was in very close touch with the Chinese consulate in March, and I'm quite confident that once the information is FOI'd and then released, we will identify very strong influence of China in the lockdowns of Australia. But for Italy, it is very
yeah.
clear. It's very clear that Italy, which is a Belt and Road Initiative country, was clearly influenced by Chinese diplomats and ministers who compelled Italy into doing the lockdowns, which have never been done in human history before. Forget about the Western countries or Eastern countries. It's never happened before for a respiratory virus.
Mm. I think Melbourne. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's like one of the longest lockdowns on the whole planet out of everyone that's locked down. Is that right?
I look. I'm sure it is. It was one of the longest. On these matters, I haven't had time to study that comparison. I'm told some others, Canada might have been long enough, but the overall issue is not just that. The very act of doing the lockdowns is a criminal
Mm,
act. It breaches the pandemic plans of Australia. It breaches the Biosecurity Act of Australia. It breaches human rights covenants. It breaches anything and everything we know about science, because science had clearly. I studied the idea of lockdowns. There have been a number of papers on lockdowns before 2020, And all of them unequivocally reject the idea of lockdowns as being extremely dangerous and harmful to public health. So lockdowns do nothing to prevent the spread of virus. They at the most delay the spread of virus, particularly a virus that cannot be eliminated from planet Earth. And so what you need to do, which is clearly written on our plans, is to flatten the curve, which is to slow down the spread of virus by means such as stay at home when you're sick, which is what Sweden did. Have a bit of social distancing. Wash your hands, and washing is better than even sanitizers in most cases because sanitizers can do much harm. No masks at all, absolutely, because masks do not work. That was the known science, including Brett Sutton's own paper. Brett Sutton, the man who has been forcing CCP policy down our throat, had actually published a paper about 20 years ago, a research paper where he proved that masks do not work even inside operation theaters. So when we're looking at the very weak evidence for masks, in fact, non-existent evidence, Sweden refused to impose masks. Sweden refused to impose quarantines. They said you stay at home when you're sick. Sweden followed the actual plans of the Western world, but the rest of the world collapsed, and that is a bit of a thing that I've written about, but a lot of books will be written about it in the coming decades. It is going to be the most, it's a milestone event for us. Either we win back our liberty and we then write the truth the way it happened, or we will all be treated like the dissidents of China and locked up and trashed. You will not find me around the place in Australia in 2 years' time if we do not fight back and win, because these guys are not going to stop at anything. They are using the police to completely control the country in every form or shape. I could not imagine this is going to happen so quickly, and that would ever happen in a country which is so-called a free nation and a Western world nation.
Mm.
So we have a very huge challenge ahead of us, Finn.
Yeah, yeah. It's shocking to see. Like up here in Queensland, I can never imagine what I've seen happening down there happening up here. Like there's no way. It doesn't seem Australian at all. Um, but because you're an economist, one of the most logical questions to ask you would probably be like, what do you think is going to be the ramifications to the economy because of this lockdown? Like how if 5 years from now, how is it still going to be felt because of this?
Yeah, look, the economic, as an, there's no economist who is only looking at the numbers. Okay, so the economics is about looking at the society as a whole. The title economics is misleading. It's about economizing and so on. If you go back in history, at the origin of economics, it was never called economics. It's a very recent term. It was known as political philosophy. It was a branch of mod, and political philosophy was nothing but a branch of moral philosophy. Economics is therefore rooted in the theory of moral sentiments of Adam Smith, and not necessarily his book on the wealth of nations. So economics is analysis of ethics. At the root of it, economics is a philosophical subject. And so when we do utilitarian analysis like a cost benefit test, we are very aware of the limitations of doing this kind of numerical analysis and comparing costs and benefits. And I have refuted the idea of a cost benefit test for a thing like a pandemic. So the very idea that you could have a cost assessed of these things, uh, and then look at the benefits is wrong, because what you mean by a benefit in this case is that you potentially save the lives of a few people, and these are the elderly people. Let's say that's your assumption that you might save. The benefit would be that you save the maybe gave an extra few months or extra 1 or 2 years to the elderly who are going to die anyway. That's what the average age is of the people who die from this virus. And then the cost of that, you would say, is these are the young people whom I've locked up completely. I've, 1 in 10 Victorians contemplated suicide during the lockdowns. That's what the study says. So now these are all mostly young people. So now you say the cost is, I don't mind if a lot of young people commit suicide. They go basically insane. The children I don't care for because they don't matter. So, and then you start saying that there are so many people in the 40s and 50s with heart disease and others who don't go to the hospitals because they've been panicked by these lockdowns. And so you then start looking at them as a cost. And then you start doing a comparison of cost and benefit. And that's what Gigi Foster, the economist of New South Wales University professor, has done. I actually disagree with that fundamentally. And I've told her that. And I think this is a big debate because that's a utilitarian analysis. Now, even that utilitarian analysis clearly tells us that the life years saved, of the people who are elderly, let's say even if you do manage to save, which I argue and I tell Gg Foster, you cannot save. You can only delay by a few months at the most the spread of the virus. So what you've done is you've given a few people an extra few months of life, and you've ruined the life and shortened the life of a vast number of people. You've damaged their mental health. I know a lot of people today as well, till today, who are suffering from the lockdowns. They had massive bouts of anxiety and depression, and they're still undergoing that. The children of Victoria, they can't even find a psychologist to look after them. There are waiting lists which are not even available anymore. So we have completely devastated the population of Victoria through these lockdowns. Now, the cost and benefit of that, when you say what's going to happen to the cost of this, in terms of economic impacts, I do not look at the economy as a bunch of numbers, as I said. I look at them as an ethical comparison. It's a moral analysis. We go back to the trolley problem. I cited the trolley problem in my ICC complaint to the International Criminal Court. That how many children are you willing to sacrifice so that an elderly person's life can be extended by 2 months or 3 months or whatever? This kind of a problem is actually going to tell you something similar to what, let's say, you're going to fight a fire in the bush. There is a house that's burning down. Okay. Now, how many other houses are you willing to burn down deliberately? So basically, you're killing these children or destroying and making the young people commit suicide, or at least have mental depression and anxiety. And you're killing a lot of people who didn't go to hospitals for heart disease checks and so on. So you're actually actively killing a lot of people in order to allegedly save some. This is the trolley problem. Therefore, it's not a cost-benefit test. How many people you want to kill in order to save so many others? No, this is the killing problem. Okay, the question is no longer of economics. It's about of killing, and killing is nothing but ethics and model questions come in. So it's very similar. I put it another way in a book. Let's say you're going to save a house in the bush that's burning. On the way, how many houses are you actually going to allow to burn and kill in order to save that house? And the answer is none. There is no authorization in any law in Australia, in the world, anywhere in any ethical literature that allows the government officials to kill people in order to save other people. This is what they have done. This killing is what I call crimes against humanity, which is what my complaint to the ICC about. And they have, sadly, they have not, after 7 months, they've said they're not going to do further analysis, which means they did 7 months of analysis, but they haven't shown me exactly why this is not a crime against humanity. I'm confident this is a crime against humanity, and I'll pursue this matter through a supplementary complaint. But so when we're looking at the devastation of families, people could not meet their fathers and mothers when they were separated. They could not cross borders. They could not attend funerals. And these politicians have been going around with G7. They don't have quarantine. They don't do masking. They pretend to put a mask in front of for a photograph, and then they are busy mingling with everybody. These are absolute criminal people. They are not our leaders. They are actually destroyers of Australia and of the world. So what we're seeing here, Afin, is that the economic cost, which is what you asked me about, what happens to the economy, to me is the least important thing. The economy does not exist for the sake of numbers. Okay, we don't care for the numbers. No economist really cares whether you are this rich or that rich. All we care if you ask any economist, they're really interested in removing poverty. They're interested in the welfare of the people. That is the only discipline in society which actually says. So economists are, when Adam Smith writes The Wealth of Nations, okay, he is not actually talking about making the rich people richer. He's writing against the collusion by the rich business people. He's fighting the monopolies. He's fighting all kinds of criminals who are opposing the development of the poor. There is no greater discipline that looks after the poorest of the poor than economists. There's no other discipline that cares so much for the disadvantaged. So this is where I see when we look at economics and say, okay, Australia might lose 1 or 2% of GDP or whatever percent of GDP in the future. To me, that's not important. What we've done is we've destroyed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. We've ruined their plans. We've stopped your children from getting educated properly. We've stopped the young from getting educated properly. We've stopped God knows how many marriages, how many children could have been born. We've completely disrupted society in this for the sake of potentially, and that's the word I use because we never have proof of that, and we have actually proof it doesn't work. And I've written my book, it didn't work, which is we're potentially going to save a few months of, of give the elderly a few extra months of life, okay, which we never did. We killed 800 people in the COVID thing in Victoria because we were focused on the wrong people. We were focused not on the elderly, which we didn't protect. We focused on stopping the young people from moving around, and they were completely safe in any case from COVID. So the idea of economics, it, how does it matter if Australians have an extra $1,000 in their pocket if they mentally gone insane? Okay, how does it matter to me if you made some people wealthier if you actually ruined a lot of children's lives in this process? So to me, that's what I consider, and it's an ethical analysis. Economics is not about a cost and benefit test alone. This is one of the most important things I keep emphasizing in my writings, in my talks, in my book. So we should always and of course, yes, you're right that there has been a destruction of wealth which can be counted of around $600 billion in Australia. And I think the overall deficit has gone up to $1 trillion or something. And so we've borrowed about $600 billion. I understand. I haven't looked at the numbers personally, but I was reading somewhere in I think the Australian financial section. But whatever the number, that's the amount of money we borrowed to pay people to sit at home. Able-bodied young people were paid good money to sit at home and to do nothing. In the process, they were also getting mental torture. That's a different issue.
Mm.
But we were destroying the wealth, and who's going to pay for that extra $600 billion? It's the future generations, right? So we're basically destroying the young children are not only been not allowed to study and get educated properly. In fact, many of them have been forced to wear masks, which are actually very harmful to their children's brain development. So their brains have been actually damaged. I've seen a lot of toddlers wearing masks because parents were so scared. And guess what? That's the age when the toddler's brain is developing. And what does the brain need? Oxygen. And what does the mask do? It reduces oxygen supply to the body. So what have we done? We've damaged our toddlers. We've damaged our young children. We've stopped their education. And these people are now will be asked to pay back the debt of $600 billion or more, all because we were allegedly trying to save a few hundred people, maybe giving them extra 2 months of life. And I don't think that ever happened in any case. It's not happened nowhere in the world that the lockdowns could actually work in that manner. Of course, if you behave the way these guys are doing, completely shut down society for months on end, etc., of course, you can control a virus. But this virus cannot be eradicated from planet Earth. The moment you open the border, in fact, they don't even open the border, and yet the damn thing comes out from here or there. They cannot stop the virus from spreading. This is a respiratory virus, and never in human history has it been stopped from spreading. So these guys are trying the impossible. They're trying to eradicate the virus, which is a prohibition under the Biosecurity Act of Australia. So they're breaching Australia's laws, apart from doing so much harm to God knows how many thousands of people. And of course, when we talk about 1 in 10 people in Victoria seriously contemplating suicide, you tell me if that's not a crime against humanity. You tell me, Finn, what is that called? So these are not economic issues. These are very serious, fundamental human issues, ethical issues, moral issues. And these fellows have completely failed us. Scott Morrison, Dan Andrews, all the other premiers.
Is there anyone like trying to replace Dan Andrews at the moment? Like, is there any sort of movement to get someone else in there?
I don't really care for anyone trying to replace because all the politicians are equally the same. The Liberal Party, the Labour Party are exactly the same, and they are basically a duopoly, or rather, we could actually call them a uni-party. That's the more precise word. They're basically one party with two branches.
Yeah. It's So, what's the plan to fix it then? Is there anything you're working on at the moment to try and solve the issues?
Yes, I will be replacing both the Liberal and Labour parties. The plan is very clear. And this has been decided after a fair bit of thinking and work over the past 7-8 months since I resigned. Initially, I thought I'll just write articles and a book, etc., and try to fix the problem. It doesn't work that way. Then I said, let's try to work with the smaller parties and see if we can have a bit of a group together to fight these guys. And that didn't work very well. Although I have a very good connection with about 4 or 5 political parties, we will probably work together in a preferencing deal. But the final answer was to actually create a new political party, which is Australia's Representatives, which I helped to create along with Peter Harris, who was the founder of the Family First Party. So Peter Harris has actually shaken up Australian politics in the past. And this time he woke up and he said, we got to do something. And it's practically the same day that we both came to the same view. And since the end of March, early Easter, we concluded that the name of the party would be Australia's Representatives. And so Peter is writing a book about this party, but this party is actually a party of debate. It says that we don't just care for liberty, we care for deep democracy, which means we want active debates. What has happened, Finn, is that during this particular period, all these parties, political parties, they basically acted as spookers to their for their top-down positions dictated to them by Scott Morrison and Albanese. So, and of course, the national cabinet was influenced by people like Dan Andrews. So the net result was they were all working on the same page, and they were forcing their view down the throats of every single parliamentarian across in Australia. No debate was allowed. Craig Kelly was a good example where he raised a few questions, and guess what happened? He was reprimanded. You're reprimanded for what? For raising a question? So saying that there's some evidence from peer-reviewed evidence about some particular therapies. Why don't you give an answer to the guy, Mr. Scott Morrison? You have got no bloody guts to answer your own. You represent, a Liberal Party MP. You basically had to throw him out, and that's exactly the kind of problem we have faced with both the parties. So what I've decided is, and Peter said that we need a party of debate. In our party, we want many Craig Kellys, not just one. We want 50 Craig Kellys, 100 Craig Kellys, debating each other vigorously, fighting with each other, speaking about the truth the way they feel it, representing the constituents. We don't want a top-down policy system. So that's the kind of new party we're building, and it's a revolution in democracy itself. So I think these two parties, I call them dinosaurs, and the uni parties and the what do you call them, duopolies, and they're gone. They're history. Now we come out as the new way of doing business. As you saw Amazon come out, you saw Google come out, you saw Facebook come out. New way of doing business. Australia Representative is the new way of doing politics, where we actually bring politics to the people and we bring their representatives to the top. We actually give them a platform and we don't tell them what to say. We do have a policy platform. We do have a policy framework. We do have a set of values. They must comply with that. Having said that, that's something they're willing to comply with. Craig was very keen to follow Robert Menzies' ideas of liberalism. He joined because he was fascinated by the liberal idea. And he keeps talking about how Menzies would, really inspired him. And guess what? These fellows, these low-level guys like Scott Morrison operating today in the name of the Liberal Party, they have completely blasted away Robert Menzies' ideas. Robert Menzies stood for freedom and debate, and I've shared some of his thoughts and ideas on my Facebook accounts and others. And guess what is Morrison's idea? Complete control and dictatorship. That's the kind of Liberal Party he has made it. And so Liberal Party must go. It's a dinosaur. We will make a new party that's better than the Liberal Party, and also very concerned about the disadvantage. That means it's actually a Labour Party as well. So we basically the combination of the Liberal and Labour Party, and these two parties are now no longer necessary in Australia.
Oh, wow. Do you think you'll be on the vote for the next election?
We have applied for registration on the 15th of June. We finished the entire process for getting members and auditing them and all that stuff, and we've applied. It takes 3 months. On the 23rd, which is just a few days ago, the Australian Electoral Commission has acknowledged that our application was complete in all respects. And that means it's now going to start processing, which means it'll take its own time, 3 months at the minimum. And so I'm expecting, say, end of September for registration. And if, of course, the elections are, the writ is issued before September, because there's a possibility that Morrison might really get very, very afraid of what we are doing. Peter Harris and I are not, to be trifled with. Peter Harris has completely shaken up Australian politics in the past, and I have been working on shaking up Indian politics there in India. But now I'm going to shake up Australian politics, guys. And Scott Morrison better be aware, we are not going to let him hang on for long. I've actually issued an ultimatum. I will be working with other parties to issue him an ultimatum to agree to our demands, or we will preference Liberals last. What am I saying? Liberals last. Why? Because liberals, as a prime minister, he's a Liberal Party guy. He had the responsibility of leading the country, which he did not. Now he has, if he wants us to, if he wants our party to preference the Labour last, he must follow some of the things that I'm going to demand. And I'm working on a proposal that we will send out and publicize in the media, hopefully in the next month or so, and give him basically an ultimatum to do what we say or completely be wiped out, because we will get him out. The first thing is he will go, his party will go, and that doesn't matter to me because they're both the same anyway. But it matters to Scott Morrison, right? Whether he stays or goes. And so he better get the message that I'm not trifling here. Morrison, he's a young man compared to me. This young man has completely mistreated Australia. I will not allow people like him to mistreat Australia. We will get him out of the way, and unless he listens exactly to what he needs to do, which is to follow the laws. And I've written a lot about what he should do, and I'll write some more, and I'll send him we'll send a proper media release, and we'll tell him what to do. And if he doesn't do it, liberals will be preferenced last. And that means the death knell for the Liberal Party, because they are tottering and doddering on the streets. They are pretty much like virtually with a one-seat majority, and that majority can be pulled out from the hat in the marginal seats. And so I think that's the minimum expectation. But no, we're not here to just throw out Morrison. We're here to govern. Now, whether that can happen in 3 months' time, I think the answer is we don't know. But you never succeed without trying. The first step is always to try. So let's just try.
What if you got in? Let's say you get in, you get voted in. What's the first things you start working on? Like, what are your first
Well,
goals
we've
you
got
try
a very clear-cut platform on this matter. The first thing, of course, we want is the entire policies of the pandemic to be reversed. All of them, not a single one will be continued. The borders will be opened. The quarantines will be stopped. There'll be no lockdowns. There'll be complete prohibition on lockdowns. We will have the standard policies, which I've already mentioned, which is social distancing, which is wash your hands, which is stay at home when you're sick. And of course, if you're really interested, if you think masks work for a short period, N95 mask might work. If you're in a crowded environment, wear an N95 mask. But also, particularly look after the elderly. So which means in aged care homes, we'd want the aged care carers to wear N95 masks. And did you know that in Victoria, these fellows never got N95 masks? They were given some surgical masks, which actually do not even protect from the virus. And that's the reason why 800 people elderly died in Victoria from the COVID. So what we will do is we'll make sure that we do what is written in our pandemic plans. And we will make sure we do not follow China. We do not follow Xi Jinping. That's the first thing. Second, after reversing these policies, we will set up a COVID Justice Royal Commission. We've got that clearly up there, a Royal Commission with a clear mandate to find out who broke the laws of Australia, when were they broken, why were they broken, why did the warnings from people like me, when I was inside the government, I started warning about this from the end of February. I've been warning about this for quite some time. I came out and started warning them. I've written a book about it. Why were warnings from people like me not heeded? Why were warnings from people like Adam Creighton not heeded? And so many other people who have been warning about these bad policies. Why were these warnings not heeded? And so this is what the Royal Commission will do. And once its recommendations come in, we'll obviously implement certain reforms. But the other side is a completely market-oriented, successful economy that's very strong in defense. So one of the things that I've come to a view, is I've said about it recently in a bit of a talk, was that we are no longer safe from the kind of vigorous policies of China. We've reached a point where Australia is now pretty much like an orphan, as it was during the World War II, when UK was so weak it could not protect us, and it was basically America that came in, General MacArthur that came in and could help us at the end. So we are today an orphan because the UK has weakened to almost being a minor country in the world. It can't come and protect us. Okay, so just be clear about that. We look at USA; it is completely on the back foot, and many expert opinions tell us that it is actually on the decline. I don't see it on the decline, but I see the leadership of Joe Biden and others as very much pro-China. And so these guys aren't going to
Mm.
protect us from China. So if Australia is not going to be self-sufficient in its defense, then let me be let's be very clear that whatever happened in the last 2 years is nothing is going to be like a is a minor is a minor little inconvenience compared to what we will face once China comes in and takes over Darwin, for example, and wants to take over the country in whatever way. And they can apply both economic and military pressure, both directly and indirectly. And let me tell you about the indirectly first, because I don't think China will directly attack us, because that's probably a bit of an unnecessary job for a country with 1.4 billion people to just come and attack 25 million is a very trivial exercise. They can do it anytime they want. They will probably not do that. They will rather use proxies, and I'm not going to name them, but there are countries on our borders we can easily be used as proxies for China to attack us, to both economically and militarily, and to inconvenience us and to weaken us. So we have to be very strong in our defense. So that's going to be the second issue. The economic side I've already mentioned. It's a market-driven society. Uh, we'll be following more or less the reform policies that good economists always recommend, which we never get done. We will actually see a lot of reforms in the tax system, where we will shift towards the more efficient taxes and reduce the inefficient ones, reduce the more regressive ones, which are like the consumption taxes, keep them under control, a balance of these things, encourage investment and so on. So we're talking about very strong economy, a very strong defense, and extraordinarily strong protections of children and the disadvantaged. Uh, we've seen the children being completely mishandled and mistreated in this pandemic. We've also seen significant problems with their security. So we've seen a lot of pedophiles, etc. Apparently going around, and their details are not disclosed to publicly, etc. So there's a lot of information that we have received as a party that we will try to investigate. And of course, not the least of these is our very significant commitment to reconcile and bring everybody, the indigenous community, into the normal, full-fledged life of Australia. Because like even today, I was reading a report, which basically says that 65% of the Aborigines of Australia feel racially discriminated. Now that is completely intolerable. The very idea, and by the way, they not only feel this discrimination, but this affects them in their mental health and physical health. So these guys are living 8 years less than the non-indigenous people. Okay, so people like us, we come here, we probably live the same as the average person in Australia. But the indigenous who've lived here for 60,000 years, what about them? Well, we treat them so badly, even today, that they feel discriminated against. They feel their children are being stolen from them even today, and they're I actually heard this from a very significant Aboriginal leader. He says that the police commissioner has no response to his question. Why do you take the children from the parents so easily, on some lame pretext or the other? And there's a lot of corruption in the money that is doled out, allegedly doled out to the people. So we don't want doles. We want people to stand on their own feet. And I think there's a bit of work that needs to be done on the indigenous side as well. These are, and of course, the environment. Let me not just move away from this most important topic. On the environment, we definitely want to protect the environment. It's something that should be preserved for the future generations, and and at the same time, we need to make sure we use it adequately and with proper assessment of the risks and sustainability assessments. And I've also asked for, and this is my view, and there could be other views in the party, a comprehensive review of things like the climate change data. I have strong reasons to suspect that we might not be doing the right thing on the climate change, because we've been swayed by these international organizations, which, like the WHO this time, have actually been captured. So when we see organizations captured by the pharma industry, which is WHO, obviously the IPCC captured by the solar or whatever industry, then again we have problems here. We don't want globalists, we don't want corporate companies, etc., corporate influences to contaminate Australia's policies. So we will review some of these things, but also being mindful that if there is any need, we'll obviously look for a proper solution like a carbon tax. But I'm not wedded to any of these things at the moment. I think we want more people to join the party, to look at the data once again. And so we've got a very comprehensive agenda here. We are here to govern. We're not here to trifle around. We are a better and far superior party, even though there are only few of us today, far superior to the Liberal and Labour parties. We have a better agenda. We are much more ethical than them. We have much more integrity of every sort. These people do not even know anything about the kind of quality that we bring. They're not in that league. They are completely spruikers. They're third-rate people who basically looking for their own careers, and they crush the people on the way. And we are here to support the people. It's a radically different approach.
No, sounds sounds like a really good plan, actually.
Yeah.
Just to go back on helping the Aboriginals. Do you know like specifics of any plans or anything like that you do to get them
I
to
haven't
fix that issue?
had
Really?
so we've got. I've been talking to Michael Anderson. Michael Anderson was one of the four Aboriginal leaders who set up the tent embassy outside the Parliament in 1972. That is obviously a national monument of some sort, even today. After 6 months and outside the Parliament, they were driven away uh, by changing the laws, which actually initially was allowed them to, to set up a small little tent in that, in the Parliament park and the garden. After some time, they changed the laws and kicked them out. That definitely didn't really work because the movement grew, and that was when the Aboriginal leaders more or less fought for their rights in Australia, 72. Remember, this follows the revolution of Martin Luther King in the USA, where basically he brought in a kind of aspiration, which again comes from Mahatma Gandhi, effectively. So you see this fight back coming, the ethical fight back, which is what we are bringing here as well. The ethical fight back happened in the case of people like Michael Anderson, and that led him. He's now pretty much, I think, 10 or 15 years older than me, I suppose, and I'm 61, so he's getting really old. All of us, but his point was that he spent his whole life looking at the situation, and he still considers, and he's very clear that there's a lot of oppression going on even today, and it's institutionalized oppression. I think what he means is that there are the rules and the laws that are there to deal with the Aboriginal issues. They're very they're not designed to be compatible with their culture. They're not designed to be consistent with the human rights and ethics. And the way they're implemented is obviously extraordinarily poor. So his greatest concern has been the fact that children are being taken away from the parents. And I think that's something that came out very clearly in a report which I saw today as well. So we do have a lot of work here to work with the Aboriginal community to make sure that this gap of 8 years of longevity is covered off. But that cannot be covered off without the complete moral regeneration of the people who deal with them. So anyone who deals with the Aboriginal communities, the policies, etc., I think we need to have a model reorientation to make sure that they do not discriminate. The fact that these guys are feeling discriminated, and the fact that and this is, by the way, racism. They call it racism. And what is racism? Racism is the lowest form of tribalism, where you begin to see yourself as different just because of some skin color rather than the characteristics of the individual. So this is also fascism. I call it fascism. What is the fascism? Has only one unique characteristic. Of all the other characteristics, only one, and that is it actually it looks at people through the lens of a group. So we have the Jews being looked down upon and isolated in Nazi Germany. Now that is actually fascism. The fact that you bring the Germans together against the Jews, and so these ideas that the Aboriginals are somewhat different. At one time, of course, this was well accepted theory of this country, and I'm sure of all of the world at that time, that the different so-called races are different, and that's complete nonsense. But the very idea that we have very talented people like Michael Anderson fighting back, we need to find those people, and we need to really work together with them. We need to make them our leaders. We need the country that needs them to be our leaders, and they will tell us what is the best way forward, because they're not against development. They're not against advancement. I think all they want is the self-respect and the ability to manage their own life like any other person. Like we manage our own families, We don't. It would be atrocious for the police to come and take away my children, whenever they feel like, and that's what's happening with the Aboriginals. So that's not a good thing, right? So we've got a long way to go, and I think the sense I've got here, and that is why Michael Anderson was really keen for a different party or a different approach, is because the existing parties have completely failed. They say a lot of things, but they never do anything. So we have to
Mm.
really do something here, Fen.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, completely agree on that one.
Mm.
What do you think are going to be some of the backlashes? So let's say you start removing all these things to do with COVID that Dan Andrews has set up. What do you think
Yeah.
the backlash is going to be from China if that were to occur?
I mean, the China is such a huge elephant in the room. It is basically that kind of thing that
Yeah.
if it ever wanted to do a backlash,
Hmm.
it could do it with a with the back with the tip of its back finger, little finger.
Hmm.
That's what
Hmm.
Australia would be, so-called backlash. No, the China.
Yeah.
I think China is not going to waste time on Australia doing silly things. It's got its own
Hmm.
things to manage. So I don't worry about the backlash from China. I do. I want to make it clear though that I'm very strong about identifying the role played by China in the hysteria, in creating the hysteria. And I'm not really
Yeah.
persuaded by the Wuhan lab theory, but look, that's also an option that they might have done something to create. This is a very mild pandemic. So, the question that I've raised in my Facebook live feed talk today is why would anybody who could invent, let's say a deadly virus, why would they invent a thing which is so mild? Just explain to me. I mean, this is not. It is basically the data of Sweden. When I look at that, and I've shown it to people in the streets of Victoria and in the Flinders Street station, and I showed it to the police as well and said, "Can you please tell me which of these is 2020?" I've mixed up the data of the last 20 years. You cannot distinguish. You can't tell me which is 2020 because 9 out of the last 20 years, the death rate was higher than in 2020. So when you have a country without lockdown, having a relatively mild, death rate, uh, then I question the idea that this is such a deadly thing that it had to be created in a lab. Because if it was in a lab, I'd say that's a stupid lab because they couldn't even create a proper virus. I mean, what's the point of a lab which creates a virus that can be barely distinguished in the data? And in fact, honestly, if you look at the Swedish data, I looked at the data of the death rate of Sweden, and it's quite shocking because it's actually been falling down for the last 20 years or 30 years. It's just almost like a one-way journey
Mm.
downwards. So we don't see the kind of massive increase in deaths that would have occurred if this was a dangerous pandemic. So I think on these two things, the fact that China caused the hysteria and that there is obviously need to study the Wuhan lab and to make sure if such things are happening, the gain of function work that is obviously funded by people like Fauci himself in 2015 or so, we want to make sure we understand it properly and we really know what China and others are doing. It's almost like a bioweapon. If it is actually happening, I think we need to regulate that. And I think it's going to be very hard to regulate bioweapons. These kind of things have been used in the past. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, they were all used by all countries, including the Western countries. It's only by working out that this is actually killing everybody recklessly. Like the collateral damage is so huge that it is not a suitable weapon for a war. So you definitely
Mm.
want to bring these under control. But science is going to continue anyway. And so what we're going to have is a very big challenge here. But if people are yet have reached the point where they can actually create viruses, and I think they can. The question is how dangerous can these viruses be? On that one, I can tell you that I take advice from people like Sunetra Gupta. Sunetra Gupta of Oxford University, the professor of theoretical epidemiology, says very clear. She said this in 2013 on one of her lectures, and you can actually see it on YouTube, where she says that the reason why we will not get a major pandemic in the future, and she said this in 2013, she said it very clearly. And the reason is that so much international travel is happening now compared to what happened 100 years ago. And international travel does the same thing that kindergarten does for children, which is it exposes them to new forms of viruses. Okay, so the kids have gone through a kindergarten, they come back every day sniffing or some other thing with a mild fever. That's great for them because they're getting exposed to a vast bunch of viruses. Now, when we are traveling internationally, we're bringing a virus or the other. Every second guy is bringing some virus and transmitting it, etc., all over the world. It's like pollinating viruses. That is strongly strengthening immunity in every population of the world. So her view was because a virus can only be deadly if our immune system fails. Okay, and cross reactivity is one of the most critical things, and of course innate uh, T cell immunity, etc. But I'm talking of cross reactivity, which is the most fundamental driver of immunity, which is we saw in India, where virtually very small death rate in India, one of the lowest in the world in COVID. Uh, not The two reasons: one, of course, a very low median age population, but the second is the fact that people are so unhygienic and they're busy transmitting all kind of viruses to each other all the time. So the coronavirus, which is there are six of them, I think now, and four of them are endemic anyway in nature for the last hundreds of thousands of years. If you are getting these coronaviruses as common cold, basically once in a while, then guess what? That builds cross reactivity. That means you are now better able to defend against another coronavirus like the COVID virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So I think the very idea that the virus in the laboratory can be dangerous in the future is questionable because the human body is also is designed by evolution to defend itself. And we have both the innate system and the adaptive system, and that includes, of course, cross reactivity, which means it's also very interesting. There's so much research I was reading. Some people who've been that even some vaccines like the BCG cause great immunity to some other kinds of viruses. So what we're seeing is the immune system of ours is the gold standard immune system, that we have managed to get from nature. And so no matter what happens in the future, we're not going to get some deadly and dangerous viruses. So I think that was the general point to keep in mind when considering any of these theories about you know Wuhan lab viruses or whatever. Yeah.
Mm. From what I've seen about that, there seemed to be quite a lot of evidence that it did come from the lab. One of the things when they started the investigation, the people at the lab, the head virology lady, was actually called back into the lab, and then when they went in to do a report, they didn't even provide all the information. They just said, "Yeah, we checked internally ourselves, and it was all good," and that was it. That was the report. So that's
Yeah.
kind of sus. Also, you don't need to call that lady back to that lab, that specific lab, for no reason. Like she was on her holiday. She was done.
Yeah.
She was on
But
leave
Finn, I think we need to
on the
discount
train.
these are all theories, Finn. I would discount them all
I
completely.
guess. Yeah.
My
Mm.
thing is very straightforward. I always look at the big picture. The big picture is
Mm.
that this is a very mild pandemic by any standard.
Mm.
And if this is a mild pandemic, then all this theory of cooking it up doesn't matter because also
Yeah.
it fails to take into account the fact that we have actually got massive immunity against coronaviruses anyway.
Mm.
So the fact that people are going to cook up a coronavirus is stupid because people already are immune to coronaviruses, right? So then you need to cook up something completely novel, and this is definitely not a novel virus. It is very similar to many other coronaviruses. So I question. I mean, yes, you can potentially, use some technologies here and there, but if you are doing bioweapons, there's got to be another thing that I need to see proof of, which is that China would be stupid to produce a dangerous virus, very stupid, if it didn't have a remedy for its own population. Tell
Mm.
me, why would China produce a bioweapon and then release it all over the world? It's starting from its own country, right? So you need to explain to me
Mm.
why it would do that if there was
Mm.
no remedy available to it of that for that virus. So this is a very mild pandemic, therefore disproves the idea of cooked up virus, and the virus spread
Mm.
from China, which also potentially disproves the fact. But why would China kill its own people in order for to first attack, to attack the world? So the bioweapon theories are very interesting
Mm.
because we as humans love
Mm.
the idea of conspiracies and so on. But a matter of this sort, where we basically refusing to see the more obvious fact that China actually caused all the fake videos and the hysteria, which then led us to the lockdowns, which actually killed us, destroyed us, and
Mm.
ruined the mental health of our people. That is
Mm.
something we're ignoring because it's not so exciting, I suppose. But the idea of a conspiracy of our lab is very exciting, and a lot of people are very excited about it. I find it's really stupid because really I can't see the logic of this being a man-made virus and of or China killing its own people first. Then you need to prove to me that China actually had a therapy or recipe against the virus, which it has used for its own population, antiviral or whatever you call it, Otherwise,
Mm.
why would it do this? So, there are a lot of fundamental
Mm.
problems with this theory. And so when we do the weapons of mass destruction, we saw in Iran, and sorry, Iraq, and we saw the fake nonsense that was demonstrated allegedly, this weapon of mass destruction. That's basically a political exercise to mislead everybody, because we love conspiracies. All humans love it,
Mm.
but we don't use
Oh
our common sense logic to say, but
yeah. Mm.
this is why does it, why will it work? Why and where does it work? Where's the proof? And those kind
Mm.
of things are very much popular with the politicians, because they can. There are a lot of people, a lot of chatter. This is But to me, I'm saying sorry, it doesn't add up. Not yet, not yet. And even if it adds up, it doesn't
Mm.
stop. It doesn't mean that we did any of the right things. Why did we copy China in the first place? If we think China
Yeah.
is against us and they are creating weapons against us, please tell me, why the hell are you copying China's lockdowns? How
Mm.
stupid are we that we first say, let's copy China in every single thing that they're doing, all these stupid lockdowns and curfews and God knows whatever, and then we say, oh, but these guys actually attacking us through the virus. I mean,
Mm.
if the most obvious way they have attacked us is through the fake videos and so many other things that I've shown, very clear cut hands of China. So China has definitely attacked the world, but it's probably not done it through this through the virus itself. It's done it through the lockdowns, and it's done it through these other policies which are suicidal. And people somehow seem to be ignoring that. That's their call, but I'm not ignoring it.
Mm.
And I think that's where we need to be very clear that China is not our friend. Is nobody's friend for sure. It's attacking us some way or the other. There's no doubt about it.
Mm. I think one of the not to stay on the lab too long, not to dwell on it, but I think like one of the best arguments I've heard is that it was an accident, like it accidentally leaked out. It wasn't deliberate, and I don't think they're making them to be bioweapons as such. I think the lab exists to kind of counter nature, so we create it first. This is the theory I've heard. I don't know how correct this is, but it's
Let's
to
move
counter
on.
it before nature
Let's move
comes up
on.
with it
Then
first.
that's
Yeah,
basically
but
I call it a
just
secondary
to
issue, a minor issue here.
Sorry, I'll let you go on. But just to finish up, and to what I would think to that, just to finish up my thoughts, sorry, is to that would be important to know, because if that is the case and they are doing that, I want to know that there's things in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So that's one of the main reasons that I care if this is from a lab or not, because if it is, there's no one that I know that wants this to happen again. So we need to have things in place to make sure that China's going to secure this lab if this lab is going to stay opened, and to
All
make
right.
sure that it's going to be reinforced
By
and
all means,
not
carry on the
reoccur
research.
again.
You're most welcome. I think everybody should carry on the research. There's nothing stopping
Mm.
research here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but as you say, it's absolutely crazy around the world how what China has put out is basically just annihilated the whole world for an entire year.
Yeah.
When you're saying the stuff that China's putting out, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like the videos of the doors getting welded shut and that kind of stuff?
Oh
What do
yeah,
you mean
yeah.
when you say
Not the
that stuff?
doors getting shut. That's of course completely fake as well. But the people falling down and the other, there's so many of these about 20 of these videos that I saw are completely fake. They were cooked up fake videos, and so nothing leaves China. You're aware that everything is controlled, state controlled. That even the social media, not a single thing leaves the control of China without the approval of the CCP, and CCP is everywhere. So these videos are very clearly planted. There's so much literature on that, by the way, including the open letter that I wrote. There's so much evidence. All of this was clearly planted by China. Okay, and they also kept on prompting the world leaders at that stage to lock down. And they said that if you don't lock down, you're actually going to breach human rights of the people. And so these crazy people, they were pushing for the lockdowns, and they have managed to influence a lot of either what you call uh, stooges, or just the stupid people who sort of come along and join them. And don't know which one
Mm.
is Neil Ferguson, for example, and his models are completely wrong all the time. And people like him have been cooking up stupid models, which Sweden happily ignored and said they're completely useless. Sweden actually completely ignored
Mm.
Neil Ferguson, because Neil Ferguson has got not a single days of biological education in biology. This man doesn't understand the human body, doesn't understand the viruses, doesn't understand the immune system, and he's busy writing articles on this whole thing because he's a mathematician. and that kind of, and is a nuclear physicist to be precise. So we've had this kind of story, which is pretty well documented about how the hysteria was so badly aggravated that politicians then decided that let's just copy China, let's throw away our own plans. And it's very interesting because in the UK as well, till the 18th of March, they were clearly saying we will follow our own plan, which is flatten the curve and do the right things the way we always do. They were exactly saying what Sweden finally did. And suddenly, on I think the 19th or the 20th of March, which is the same day which things happened here, they decided to throw everything out and to just copy China. And that, I think, was the turning point for the Western civilization, which ultimately people like me are fighting back politically or in any other way. People are going to the court. Some people are writing books, articles, and on social media. A lot of people fighting back because this is simply wrong. But you're right. The
Mm.
China had played a very significant role in influencing through the WHO chief. The Belt and Road Initiative managed to get them the votes necessary to elect Tedros in, I think, 2018 or 2019. I forget. He was elected 2018, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Tedros was elected as the head of the WHO. Now, Tedros's background is that he is a communist politician. He's got no background. He's not a doctor. He's got a master's degree in public health or something of the sort. Or he's just a public health, expert. And all his life, he's been a communist politician in Ethiopia and had very close links with China. And basically, China wanted him to be the boss of WHO, and they control the WHO. They control the General Assembly of the USA through the Belt and Road Initiative, where they managed to actually acquire 50 votes from Africa, practically for anything they want, because they basically taken over those countries. And so they were readily able to elect Tedros. And so what happens is we have the strange situation where on the 23rd, the Wuhan lockdown begins. I think it's on the 23rd or 24th that Gaudin Gallia, who is the WHO chief in China, he's the head of the Chinese, Chinese WHO branch. He comes out and says, this is not something that the WHO has recommended, and these measures have never been seen before in public health history. So he basically makes it clear that this is wrong, what you're doing. Okay. And guess what? Then this guy Tedros flies into China in a couple of days from then, I think 26th or 27th, he flies into China in January, and he meets the president for a number of meetings, and they comes out saying, oh no, this is great stuff. You're doing fantastic stuff. Now tell me, science develops through hypothesis, through experiments, through proof. And so the public health science of lockdowns, assuming there was any science, would start by saying, okay, you, Mr. President, want to do lockdowns in Wuhan. It's your call, your country, you're doing the wrong thing. We don't support it, but then at least do the proper research and prove it works. And then we will consider the findings, and we will see if they can be replicated, and we'll work out the cost and benefits, ethical issues, and then we'll decide. But this man decides in about 2 days, even before the lockdowns, just in the first week of the lockdowns, he decided that Xi Jinping was doing the right thing. This is unprecedented. This is the greatest thing in world history. So the lockdowns, which had never been ever imposed in human history, now suddenly became the greatest thing in human history. And so lockdowns had always been rejected by the literature, rejected by WHO's own scientists, rejected by the guidelines of the WHO. Then comes this man who's actually owned by China, owned, and I use the word quite deliberately. He is completely in China's control. And so this man comes out and says, China has done a great thing. And we have another guy called Bruce Aman or something. I forget his name. He's in Canada. He brings in that guy. And that guy also says the same thing in a month later. That report, however, has a lot of qualifiers. And I've written about this in my articles. And I've shown you, if you read that report by the joint China and joint China and Canada report, which came out, I think, in February, it looked at this and said, we have no proof that this works. But this guy goes and says, no, it works. Bruce Aman says it works. And Tedros says it works. So Tedros has basically planted all this information that about this so-called success of the lockdowns, which we know is complete nonsense, because Here's the simplest proof. Okay, I challenge anybody in this whole world to prove to me that lockdowns work, and I have a simple proof of that. Very simple. Look at the data. It was published in I think the Financial Express or something, financial newspaper, the British newspaper, which basically said compared the two charts of Sweden and the UK death rates of these two countries. Now, one of them had lockdowns, the UK, the other had no lockdowns, Sweden. You put the charts together, you have 100% match of the rise and fall of the deaths of COVID. 100% match. That means the lockdowns did not affect in any form or shape the progress of the virus. It was seasonal. It came and went with the seasons. Number one. The second thing, which is more important than that, however, is that the death rate of the UK is far, far higher than the death rate of Sweden. This is the second very glaring fact in the chart. And universally across the world, we have seen this happen, that countries with lockdowns have seen more deaths than, more COVID deaths, by the way, than countries without lockdowns. So lockdown, the very idea that this China came up with was disproven before 2020, has been disproven by at least 50, if not more, studies after 2020. So anyone who says that lockdowns work has no idea what they're talking about. They've not read the literature, the previous literature, they've not read the subsequent literature. All they're doing is they're picking and cherry picking one or two reports like the ABC. I do not know what ABC stands for. Australian Broadcasting Corporation, they say. They're a bunch of liars. I mean, crooks of the highest order, because they allegedly did a fact check on my work. The most shoddy fact check. Published it, I think, in April sometime. And they demonstrated allegedly that my claim that lockdowns cause harm is wrong. And guess what they did do? They picked up a paper, a shoddy paper, they cherry picked. That's called cherry picking. They picked one paper or two papers written in April of 2020 by people who had no clue about basic understanding of anything. And they allegedly proved in some kind of a peer-reviewed journal that this damn thing works. Okay, they did not study the topic properly. They were incompetent. There were many, many studies before and after them that completely said the opposite thing. And the data are very obvious to anybody, like I said, UK and Sweden. Just look at the facts. If lockdowns had worked in the UK, you would expect the UK's death rate to be much lower than Sweden, correct? Why is it much higher? Can anyone in ABC, the Broadcasting Corporation, criminals, which I am, by the way, personally, if I could, I would shut this organization down the first day of our forming government. I would shut it down completely, lock, stock, and barrel, for the kinds of crimes it has committed by lying through its teeth at every single day of the past 1.5 years. ABC better be put on notice. But I think the general issue is that almost all the media of Australia has lied to us on a daily basis. But the ABC has taken the cake, I would say, in this case. So lockdowns are very dangerous. Okay, this is very clear. So China has a policy of lockdown imposed in such a devious manner, using people like Tedros, ignoring people like Gordon Gallia, ignoring its own guidelines of 2019, October, which very clearly didn't have any lockdowns. And then it used Italy as a Belt and Road Initiative country. As I showed you, I mentioned a little while ago, it actually influenced through its foreign minister and through diplomats, it influenced Italy, North Italy, to lockdown. The pressure that China put across the world, lockdown, is unbelievable. And of course, Neil Ferguson, talks about Italy being the greatest breakthrough, because he says today that once Italy did this lockdowns, it became now possible for us to do it. Why is this man who doesn't understand the basics of biology interested in lockdowns? He is from Imperial College. I have questioned the Imperial College's integrity. It is a very, very close links with China. In fact, Xi Jinping went to the Imperial College in 2015 in China, and actually in London, and he gave a major speech and everything else. So Jinping and China have very close contacts with the Imperial College. I've asked the intelligence agencies of Australia by writing the Director General, ACO, to investigate all these claims and possibilities that Neil Ferguson is actually being funded in some form or shape by China. It's a possibility. I'm not saying he is. I would rather not make a claim of this sort, but I would say we need to investigate why is it that Imperial College is at the frontier of all these fake models, and they're all fake, by the way, completely fake and bogus models, because we know very clearly that these models had made claims that Sweden would have 90,000 extra deaths in 2020 by June 2020. They had actually at the end of the year they had 3,000 to 4,000 extra deaths. That's the total number that you can add up. So when we're looking at the fake models coming out from Imperial College, we are also looking at Imperial College being very closely linked with China. They have a website where it says, we've got so many links with China. Then it's probably worthwhile for the intelligence agencies to look at the Imperial College and Neil Ferguson more closely. But leaving aside this thing, the point I'm saying is China has infiltrated, as I said, 1 million people across the world, including in companies, big companies, media companies, etc., are linked with China. China has used a lot of strategies, including honey trapping, including bribery, including threatening people to control them. And they've done it across the entire world. So China managed to finally get the West to crack up. They made everybody hysterical. People were running for toilet paper at that stage, roughly around the 16th or 17th of March. All over the headlines was, oh, toilet paper is running out. Why? Because people have been made so hysterical. So China was creating the hysteria. It was potentially funding its own, using its already funded people in some form or shape to influence people like Dan Andrews, who are probably influencing Scott Morrison, etc., etc. We don't know. And I think that's why the COVID Justice Commission is required to find out what happened. Why did we suddenly disband and completely trash our own laws? The funny thing is, on the 10th of March 2020, and that's very close to the time when this whole thing was, became ramshackle, Victoria published a pandemic plan on the 10th of March. And on the 10th of March, we said that this is a very mild pandemic, modest pandemic. That's the actual words used, something of the sort. We knew by the 10th of March that this is not a big deal. We also said that everything is under control. And there was no mention of lockdowns, quarantines, curfews, nothing. Okay? That was our pandemic plan on the 10th of March. But by the 20th of March, we seem to have flipped the lid. And so we need to really find out what happened. And I see China as having played a very critical role in causing this hysteria and the complete change. And so we're basically copying China's policies. Why are we copying China's policies? I want to know.
Do you know how that happened in March? Like, do you know who signed off on it, or do you know how it got passed? Far out.
No idea. That's, I think, the biggest question.
So we had it. Sorry, you go.
It was like a switch off. We switched off the Western civilization completely in one single action. We switched off the Western civilization sometime around the 20th of March, 2020.
So we had a full plan beforehand of what to do in this case.
Yes.
And we completely ignored it.
Completely and 100% burned the damn plan. We destroyed the plan. We trashed it. We removed every single sentence from that, and we did completely the opposite things.
Was there any justification given as to why we did that?
Never has any justification been provided, because the media has never asked a single question. The media of Australia does not know arithmetic. They cannot distinguish 4 million and 290 million, which is the number of people who died from COVID allegedly is 4 million. And the number of people who have to die from COVID, if it was the Spanish flu, is 19 million. They can't do numbers. Okay, they're simply illiterate. And they do not open they can't read documents. They're illiterate. They can't open a pandemic plan. The Australian media, including all the big major newspapers and television channels, they cannot read. They cannot open a book and read it. They cannot read the laws, because the laws have been completely breached. They cannot read, and they cannot do arithmetic. And they're busy giving us all this nonsensical advice that comes from the WHO, which is completely under the control of China. So and I'm quite confident that they're actually acting on behalf of China. I'm actually not joking here when I say that, because we have evidence that so many of the CCP people have been planted in all these companies. So I don't think people are that illiterate. I don't think people don't know arithmetic. The only answer that works
it's got to be deliberate.
It's got to be linked with China.
Yeah. It's such a weird time, and I don't see where we go from here because the credibility of the WHO, like who's going to trust them now moving forward? What's to say? It's like the boy who cried wolf. Now it's like we're not going to trust them moving forward, and what happens next time when the wolf actually shows up? It's like we no longer trust these guys.
The
It's
first
a
thing
very
here,
strange
Finn,
thing they've done here.
first thing, Finn, is
Mm.
we must shut down, if not, or at least defund almost all the United Nations organizations. And the reason is very clear. I explained to you. The General Assembly has now been completely captured by China. You see, the Security Council is a different beast. And I think there's no reason to stop the Security Council from operating. That's a place where we stop war. We do not need the United Nations anymore. The entire United Nations has become contaminated by China, and effectively it has purchased the whole of the United Nations. So when all the bodies of China of the United Nations, and by the way, the IPCC had been very badly contaminated much earlier. So I have a lot of concerns about the IPCC, which I think are also becoming more and more clear. So when these organizations of the United Nations are not trustworthy, they basically are being operated by our enemies of the West. I do not see the need for us to fund them. Okay, that's my clear view. Now, as far as the party is concerned, our party, we will form a view once we actually form government. But I don't see myself sympathizing with organizations like WHO or funding them. And the other one I wanted to mention here is that the knowledge that is, so let's say, I'm just pulling out a book at random. Okay, this is a little textbook of economics, uh, whatever. Some little textbook of intermediate or micro or whatever economics, right? Now, this book and maybe another 100 books, uh, you know, I read the books as an economist. Another person reads the book as an economist. I'm employed in the Victorian government, and another one is employed in the United Nations. What is the difference between us? There is none. The point I'm making is that the idea that an expert of the WHO knows more than the expert of Victoria is nonsense. Our own experts, our own local doctor, our own local, thinker, philosopher, economist knows way more than so-called. Just because you are dealing with all the countries in some form or shape doesn't make you smarter. The knowledge of the human head is not suddenly increased because you're now serving the United Nations. So the point I'm making is we do not need any expert advice from any international organization. The only advice that I've been seeing coming out from these organizations is falsehoods, complete lies. And I can tell you that in the climate change space as well, I've seen only lies, massive sets of lies pumped out on a daily basis by the IPCC, massive set of lies pumped out on a daily basis by the WHO. If you think of even organizations like the CDC and even the TGA, I'm very much in question. I question these kind of regulatory bodies as well because they are funded by the pharma industry. They're basically not independent, and we can get better advice from other people, and we don't need them to tell us anything. So I think the idea that we are deprecating our doctors today, our doctors in Australia are in total fear of the AHPRA, the Health Practitioners Regulatory Authority. Why? Because these authorities, regulators, are sitting on top of their head. You can be a doctor after having spent 15 years in study, okay, after high school. And there's a stupid bureaucrat sitting in the AHPRA who's done 2 years of study in some mild side issue. He is dictating to you what you will say and what you will think and what you will prescribe. I don't think this is right. I think we need to get back to the world where there is very limited, regulation of experts. So we need to have multiple experts. That's why I call it we need to have a black hat commissioner. A black hat commissioner is a guy, this is based on the innovative, blue hat, yellow hat, and so on. The idea of a black hat is basically somebody who on the table who actually questions everything. It's like the devil's advocate. We need a black hat commissioner officially inside the government who's an expert or a body of experts who are opposing the government experts. We need to know both sides of the story. What are we getting today? We're getting one side of the story. And whose side are we getting? We're getting China's side in the case of this pandemic. We're getting CCP's story being fed to us. We're also getting the pharma industry story fed to us. So these are the enemies of the people. They're not our friends. Their story is what is controlling our agenda here in Australia, right? We need a black hat commissioner which has got other people with different views. We need to listen to both sides. As political leaders of Australia, they need to listen to both sides. They can't be listening only to the international organizations. The failure of Scott Morrison is so comprehensive. He needs to walk out and leave right now, today itself. The man is a complete misfit to govern. He has destroyed Australia because he's listening to the WHO. He should be asking for advice from the best people here, like the COVID Doctors Network in Victoria had provided some fantastic advice. And guess what? Ben Andrews did not bother to respond, and Scott Morrison did not bother to respond. When you say, what are the alternatives? The Liberal Party? These people are a complete joke. Matthew Guy is a complete joke. I asked Matthew Guy when I was still in the government, I said, why is this mandatory mask requirement outdoors? Can you please ask in Parliament? What did he do? He blocked me on Twitter. That's the Liberal Party. Scott Morrison doesn't ask any question. Why are we relying upon these two parties anymore? They're both betrayed us completely. They're both listening to the globalists. They're both listening to the pharma industry. And even I'm not going to the vaccine issue, but that's a very controversial issue. But I'm just saying, on the vaccine side as well, I don't see evidence of actual independent thought. I see this being completely driven by the pharma industry. And so we have China and pharma industry driving Australia's people's lives. I think people have to fight back. They need to wake up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. With these companies like the WHO and the United Nations, when you're saying just stop funding them, do you think they're too late to save? Like, can we fire the people that are in there now and replace them, or is it too far gone?
Because these are international bodies, they only can be eliminated through the United Nations. So you have to then create a completely new set of international rules. In my view, the new set of international rules will completely disband the United Nations, and we will have only the Security Council. And that will actually include countries like it will broaden the Security Council will be much bigger than 5 countries. With a veto, of course, we probably need 5 or 6 countries. We'll have probably a few countries, mostly from the Western civilization, sitting on the Security Council and assuring the world of its security. And we do not need to have the ragbag of 150 or 170 countries that form the United Nations General Assembly, because these countries, this assembly has been captured by China, and we do not want to be under the grip of China. It is getting just too bad. We have not paid attention as Australian citizens to the way the world has radically changed in the last 20 years. The environment, the geostrategic environment has changed, and now the capture by China of the global institutions has become comprehensive. And if we do not really review this, and so when you say you to go fire these guys, no, you can't fire them. You can't fire Tedros. No, you can't. You can work with the United States and many other countries to shut down the United Nations, which is what I think should be done.
So you don't think they're savable? You don't think we can replace them?
We don't need them. Why do we need? Why do we need this? A rag bag of 160 countries talking through their hat on every single topic. Let them all run their own countries. That is good enough in the past. It should be good enough now. The only reason the United Nations was created was to ensure peace, but the peace in the world is not being created, is not being assured by the United Nations. That is the biggest folly if anybody thinks it is. The peace of the world has been assured through the nuclear balance of power, through the strategic and geostrategic actions of the big countries. The peace of the world has not been assured by the United Nations, and it's been assured by organizations like NATO. And so why do we need this in the first place, the United Nations? What benefit does it give to us? All it does is it takes away our energy, time, and money and gives us back nothing in return but all these criminal policies that are being forced down our throat. So we don't need any other expert apart from our own. What I'm saying is, even in Australia, we need to listen to all kinds of experts, not just one side. When we are having a serious disease, do we just listen to one doctor, or we take a second opinion? We take a second opinion.
Second, yeah.
It is absolutely critical. In fact, when I had my prostate surgery a few years ago, I actually took about 6 opinions. And I took a week off from work, and I read every single published article on this issue. before I took a decision. I didn't listen to the experts either. I wanted to have as many opinions, given them the data,
Yeah.
all the biopsies and everything else, and MRI scan, etc. And then I got their opinions. I also looked at the literature, and I found that doctors were giving me rubbish advice. Most doctors do not even know the literature. And so I studied the literature, found an answer which worked for me, and therefore took my own decisions. But what I'm saying is, why do we need to listen to a doctor? And this guy, Tedros, not a doctor. Why do we need to listen to incompetent people who just happen by political reasons to become the head of a United Nations body? What gives Tedros more knowledge than Eamon Mathieson of Melbourne, who's heading the COVID Doctors Network? I know Iman very well, and I respect and admire Iman's knowledge 100 times more than I respect Tedros, whom I know is a corrupt politician from Ethiopia, as a communist politician who's potentially been involved in lots of crimes when he was young. So why why don't we sit back for a minute and figure out why are we interested in these globalist bodies at all? What is the value add they give to us? Why can't we get it from our own books and our own literature, our own experts? Why don't we do that?
Hmm. Before the pandemic, I would have argued that, and I would have said, well, it's in case something like a pandemic happens, then we've got a global organization that can do something about it. But now seeing that they have no idea what they're doing,
No,
I completely agree with you. I,
this is called government failure. Now, this is
yeah.
where, most people who don't understand economics, they really don't know this. There is nobody who's gone through a study of economics who will recommend these kind of international bodies.
Yeah.
We study a
Yeah,
thing known
no
as
way.
public choice. Public choice theory says that some of the biggest enemies of the people are the bureaucrats. People who work inside the government are generally some of the biggest enemies of the people. Okay? And there's a lot of reasons for that. And that's the entire study of that is called public choice theory. Okay? And the United Nations is the bureaucracy on steroids because there is no accountability. At least the bureaucracy of, say, Victoria, the Treasury, where I used to work, is accountable to the people through the treasurer of Victoria. But the chief of the World Health Organization is not accountable to the people of Australia, even remotely. You do not elect him, you do not throw him out, you just pay him. Now tell me, why will he bother about you? So the incentive for these guys to be corrupt and criminal is so high that there is practically no chance of any international organization at any stage in human history being honest and looking after the people. They will always be the enemies of the people. And if anyone doesn't understand that, I invite them to study public choice theory, and you will realize very quickly why the bureaucracy itself is dangerous. And now you're creating a bureaucracy that has got no accountability under the law. Nobody can throw out Tedros. Nobody. Not a single Australian has got any power to throw him out because Australia has one vote in the General Assembly. One vote, along with some unknown countries which have been purchased by China. So China is now competing with these other countries that have been bribed and paid off by China, and it's got one vote. All the Australians combined have one vote. How can you throw out this guy who's owned by China? No, you can't. You better not have the United Nations in the first place.
Is the argument not then, sorry, just to play devil's advocate, but then if there's no intermediary, if there's no organization there, then it will just be a total Wild West between countries?
I think anybody who understands, and that's where the political court comes in. Politics has always been very the concept of national self-interest has driven all kinds of alignments, realignments, shifts, and games. I call them games between countries. There has never been a balance or equilibrium between countries. So the Wild West is the default position among nations. The Wild West
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the default position. So when we are saying that there will be a Wild West, let's be quite clear that if there were not nuclear weapons between the nations since the World War II, if there were not thousands of these nuclear weapons pointing at each other, and that is called the Wild West, really, really Wild West.
Yeah.
If there was
Yeah.
no Wild West, we would not be at peace. So Wild West does not necessarily lead to war.
Yeah.
Okay, The Wild West can lead to significant control and alignment. So there is a NATO, which is a bunch of people that actually operate, even though independently they'll be ferociously fighting each other. But then they have this organization. NATO is not United Nations. Nothing stops people from having alliances. Okay, and so these alliances that we talk about, which is what I've written about in our I've said about this as well as I've written about it. Alliance between, say, the United Kingdoms, India. I'm just going in this order, and then we have Japan, and then we have the United States. So if we have an alliance with these four countries, we become five countries together. Call it anything you like. This alliance can substitute for us and give us all the things that we need as a nation, all the security we need. And the United Nations will never give us anything close to that. So no, the United Nations is a completely unnecessary concept, very expensive and very, very dangerous. That's what we have seen that with the IPCC, and we are seeing that with the WHO.
No, yeah, I agree completely. So, wow, would it's kind of almost like anarchy in a way, like it's controlled anarchy. So each country would be kind of each country would be their own nationalist, kind of idealized. So,
It's much
do
better
you
that
think
way.
that would,
It's like
yeah,
it's like saying, uh, you know, Africa has split into God knows how many countries. There were tribes at one stage. Then the Western countries took over Africa and split into maybe large, huge chunks, and then we split that into smaller chunks. And each of the smaller chunks gets its own little nation and own little vote. You can be as small as I don't know how many few thousand people, and that's your nation. Some can be large, and they all have one vote. So we create very perverse incentives in this process. It is much better for people to be left alone, to deal with their own lives themselves, to form any alliances that they need to survive. Okay, let the Africans work on their own with their own group of people, and they will decide whether they need to work with China or not. And they're basically being purchased by China, and that's partly because they've allowed their countries to be so badly run, because they like in India, they actually refuse to read Adam Smith and sensible economics. So what I'm saying is that these nations, we should let them to their own capacity and resources. Why do we need to worry about them? If an African country is going to come and attack Australia, it's a matter of concern. But if they're busy fighting with each other, do we really care? We've given them all the literature. Adam Smith wrote his book in 1776. The fact that they don't read Adam Smith's Moral Sentiments and The Wealth of Nations, is that our problem? That's their business. They fail to study the literature. They fail to prosper. They kill each other. That's their business. We're not here to protect everybody in the world. Okay, so I think the United Nations creates a mythical organization, which actually is a very corrupt organization, where all these things still continue to happen. All the killings in Africa continue to happen under the United Nations umbrella, and then we pretend that by we are funding them and somehow saving the people of Africa. No, we're not. We're much better off by directly going and helping the Africans by setting up organizations to educate them in a good economic theory. For example, nothing stops us from setting up an organization that will teach economic theory and teach a good policy to them. Why don't we do that? And that can be done by private individuals in Australia, rather than funding through the government. And by the way, any foreign aid that we fund is also generally very corrupt. And there's so much literature in economics. Economists are very deadly people. We oppose all forms of corruption. Peter Bohr was the first economist who wrote so much against foreign aid. You'd be shocked. We hate foreign aid. Economists hate it because it is the most corrupt system in the world. It is called fungibility. The money that is transferred through foreign aid by innocent Australian people saying, hey, we're giving money for the poor, where do you think the money is going? It's actually going to buy the arms for the dictators who are killing the people of Africa. That's where the money is going. Peter Bohr showed that, and that is called fungibility, because the money, I'll explain what it means. So here I'm a dictator in Africa, right? I need $100 to run my country. Of the $100, I spend $20 in buying arms with which I can kill my own people. right? Now I only have $80 with me, right? I only have $80. I need $100. If I have only $80, I'll buy fewer arms. But then Australia comes in and says, I'll give you $20. Okay? So now I, the dictator, have got the $100 I need. So I will be able to buy that $20 goes straight into buying the arms to kill my people. The foreign aid that we are sending to these countries is directly going for killing the people of Africa through the dictators of Africa. This is what Peter Bohr found, and he demonstrated it conclusively, and all economists therefore advise against foreign aid. It is far, far better to educate people than to give them money. And if you do want to give them money, give them through a not for profit organization that actually goes and works directly with the people there. Do not give it to the government of African countries. That is the deadliest thing you can do because that will kill the people, kill far more people and children than you can imagine. So, foreign aid, global organizations are all detested by economists for very good reason.
So is that what we're doing at the moment? Are we giving governments money, or
Oh,
are
yes,
we donating
definitely
money?
giving governments
Oh,
money.
jeez.
Australia is
Do
definitely
they?
through AusAid,
So
we give
if
a lot of money.
mm, so if we know it doesn't work, then why are we still doing it? Would be the question.
I think when you say we know it doesn't work, it's like saying, um,
Mm,
you know, people understand it. No, people don't. People are do not have the time and energy to understand these issues. For them, it's like saying, I care a lot for the African children who are very poor. I want Scott Morrison to take my some of my money that I give as taxes and to give it to the government there to look after the children. They're very concerned about the children. They think that it's a great idea. The average person, therefore, puts political pressure, and politicians respond to that pressure by taking action to support what the people want. They do not tell the people the truth because it's hard for people to understand the truth. What I've told you today, by the way, is a pretty challenging set of things. I do not know many people will be able to stomach some of the things that I've said because I've actually said the truth. And in many cases, the truth is very unpalatable and counterintuitive, which is why in my book called Seeing the Invisible for Children, I basically said economics is a discipline where you see what happens behind the scenes. Everything I've told you about this thing is behind the scenes. The global organizations, the corruption of the bureaucracy there, the fact that you can't throw Tedros, the fact that the foreign aid is going into actually killing people, children, the fact that China is playing the games of all sorts in a hidden manner through all sorts of techniques. So that is what economists do. And it's very challenging because it disrupts people's views of what the world should be. Idealism is what the common man thinks about the world. You bring the people together, they somehow work. No, it doesn't work that way. It does never work that way. It is very dangerous to bring too many people together. Let them compete with each other. Competition is great. Okay? Let them let them sort out their own issues and you support them in educating them. Educate the people if you can. So look, these are the kind of things, obviously many of them are my personal ideas. I've written a lot of books and other things. I'll continue to do that. Some of these ideas will flow into the Australia's Representatives Party as well.
mm. Is there anything in the plan in that party for the education? So our schooling systems. Is there anyone in the party that's
I would personally
dedicated towards
want a
that?
complete review. I have,
Mm,
obviously, when we talk about Milton Friedman, the economist who wrote Capitalism and Freedom, and this was a great book written about 60 years ago. Before that, as well, he started looking at the school sector. One of the things that he talked about was you see, as I said, the economists are the most concerned for the poor. I am very concerned about the poor because I was in work cover authority as looking after the education sector of Victoria, and I traveled around to a lot of public schools, and I saw the shambles in which they were. As soon as you leave the city of Melbourne and the big schools like Baldwin High School, and you start going to the regions, you don't have to go too far for that. You just go to the outskirts of Melbourne, and you start seeing the complete degeneration of the schools. infrastructure, the quality of teachers, and so on. I'm not blaming the teachers. Please don't think that I'm saying that the quality of teachers is bad fundamentally. But I'm saying the kind of quality of teachers that people get in the Baldwin High School, for example, and that is because these teachers are generally the spouse of somebody who works in the CBD. Okay, so they live inside the inner city area, in the inner, and therefore they come from a very elite background. They generally have a lot of extra education. So these teachers, who are the spouse of some of these workers in the city, they're providing the a quality of education to students of the Baldwin High School that is not available to the children of schools just outside Melbourne. And so the reason why I advocate a school voucher system is that the poor would be able to pay. So we'll be paying the poor children will be funded. The parents will be funded very heavily for their children. The parents of the poor, and so they would be then that school would be able to attract by paying massive salaries to teachers to work in those areas. So the salaries of the people there would dramatically increase. Therefore, bringing in some of the people who currently teach in the inner city schools, inciting and motivating some of them at least to go and teach in the rural areas or the semi peri-urban areas. So I think the I've written a lot about school education. Okay, so I don't want to go into that. That's not the party's policy, but I want to say that we because the party's policy will be decided in consultation with the people. I think many of the ideas that I have been talking as an economist are very foreign to most people. They don't understand why these people are saying such things. They think that I'm talking, to basically as a money thing exercise. What I'm saying is here is, as I said from the beginning, as a moral philosopher, I'm talking about the welfare of the poorest of the poor. That is my first and primary goal. That will remain the goal of the Australia's Representative Party as well. And so the education policy will be hopefully revised and improved to reflect better and more significant, not just funding, but better quality education for the poorest of the poor so that they get the opportunity, they get the knowledge, because a teacher does make a difference. You can imagine from your own schooling as well that good teachers do make a big difference in our lives. And so if we don't provide children in the outer areas with good teachers, the best teachers, in fact, they need the best teachers. How do they overcome the disadvantage of many generations, which has brought them to that point where their parents can only afford to live on the peri-urban areas where houses are maybe 10 times cheaper than the houses in the inner city? And so these people who are really already poor, we're giving them probably not the very best education that we should. So to me, that is far more important objective of education system, to equalize opportunities. That's why we talk of equality of opportunity. It should not matter in Australia that a child is born in some Aboriginal community, 400 kilometers from Melbourne, or somebody who's born right in the middle of the eastern prime land area of Melbourne. So we want to equalize the opportunities for all children, and I think that should drive our policy.
Mm. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they support you?
Well, we just started the website a month and a half ago. It's pretty ordinary. It's AusReps, AUSREPS, AusReps.org. And there you'll find some of the initial thoughts. The fuller manifesto is something I'm writing at the moment. It'll be published in a week or so. It's not a full manifesto. It's still a short manifesto. Then I'll probably be drafting a fuller manifesto. So I've been doing this also, by the way. I've been doing a lot of work in writing for a political party for India for the last 15 years, 20 years. I've been working to build a liberal party in India. And there's a lot of information, and I've written books, etc. So there's a lot of material available. But I'm also very interested in getting the views of Australian experts. So I've been in touch with some of the best professors in economics from Australia. But it's not just economics. I welcome, as I said, Iman Mathieson. He's a doctor. He's a COVID network guy, a specialist. I'm very keen to get the advice of some of the best thinkers of Australia, so that our manifesto is not some kind of third-rate minor party manifesto. We want to govern. We're not here to fluff around the margins. We are here to take the place of Scott Morrison, and we will not let Albanese come in as well. So this being the goal, and as I said, we don't know, whether goals can be achieved. But if you don't try, you never achieve a goal in any case. So we are trying for the governance of Australia. Our manifesto will be comprehensive. We invite views from the most talented people of Australia. Our goal is to the welfare of every single Australian. No one should be left behind is our motto. And that also includes the indigenous community, where we dislike the idea of the leaders. I dislike the idea that Michael Anderson, when I talk to him, he talks about the word oppression. I don't like the idea of people in Australia feeling oppressed by their fellow Australians. This is a shameful situation. So I think there's a lot of work ahead. So by all means, get involved, guys. It's a platform I'm creating with the help of Peter Harris, a platform for every Australian. It is not my party. I do not intend to be associated with the party. I'm a moral philosopher. That's my job. This is just one of the things I have to do in order to get back my freedom. But in the process, I'm helping build a platform where the best Australians will come forward, would lead Australia. And I look forward to, a much better Australia for all of us in the future.
Well said. Very well said. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Sanjeev. This has been a great chat. I've actually really enjoyed this. It's gone for a while, almost 2 hours, but it's been great. Really enjoyed having you on.
All right. Thanks a lot, Finn, for having me.
No, of course, not a problem. Anytime. When more stuff happens and more things come out, more than welcome to come back on and have a talk about what's come out next. But yeah, thank you for coming on, and good night, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll catch us all later.